welcome back to the Job Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Renata Bernardi, and today I'm bringing you something a little special. This is the first of a two-part conversation that I had a few months ago with Michelle Redfern, though technically she was the host at this time and I was her guest because Michelle has her own podcast called Lead to Soar. Now, she has generously allowed us to share this conversation here on the Job Hunting Podcast because we both agree this is a discussion that needs to be heard by as many job hunters and leaders and hiring managers as possible. Now, if you're a regular listener of this show, you will recognize Michelle's name. This is actually the fourth time that she's being featured on the Job Hunting Podcast. She's one of my favorite collaborators and such a powerful voice when it comes to leadership, inclusion, and advancing women in the workplace. If you haven't come across her before, Michelle is the founder of Advancing Women in Business and Sport, where she provides consulting and advisory services focused on workplace and gender equality. She's also the host of the Advancing Women in Sport podcast, the author of The Leadership Compass, which is an absolute must read for ambitious women in leadership. On top of all that, she is an experienced executive and currently serves on a number of advisory boards, including Family Friendly Workplaces and Chief Meta Chicks. Basically, Michelle knows her stuff. So, in today's episode, we are flipping the script a little. She's interviewing me, and we dive into the topic of hiring, not from a job seeker's perspective, although we will get into that in part two, which is coming up in the next episode of the Job Hunting Podcast. But for this episode, we're talking about hiring from the hiring manager's point of view. So, if you are a leader who's ever groaned at the thought of having to fill a role on your team, or if you're simply curious about how hiring work or it doesn't work behind the scenes, this episode is for you. We talk about why hiring can feel like such a burden for employers and hiring managers, what can be done to make it a more joyful and effective process, the impact of restructures and workplace planning, and the surprising truth behind things like ghost jobs that you, as a job seeker, may have applied for. We deep dive into that as well. We also explore how job descriptions often miss the mark, how to better support hiring managers, and why understanding your team's strengths is key when it's time to hire somebody new. It's a juicy and important conversation, and there is more to come in part two. So make sure that you stay tuned, you subscribe to this podcast, because next week we're going to be talking about job hunting, especially what's it like to be looking for work when the market is a little bit slow and you can actually do what you can actually do during this so called quiet season or quiet job market. So, if you are in a rush and you can't wait for part two, you want to listen to this and go straight into part two this week, then seek out it on Lead to Soar, the podcast that Michelle has. It's in every good podcast app. I'm sure you will be able to find it. I will include a link to the Lead to Soar podcast in this episode show notes. Also, in the show notes, you will find links to the other three episodes I've done with Michelle if you're interested in women in corporate settings, career advice for women, imposter syndrome for men and women, for everybody, or leadership in general. I highly recommend going back and checking those out. Remember that the Job Hunting Podcast has a huge archive of episodes and they do not age, so you can go back and check them out, especially if you go to the podcast website. You can use the category search or the search box to search for topics of your interest. But before we start, a quick reminder, if you are enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe. I love getting messages from you and I get them every day, all the time, and it's adorable and it makes my day, it makes me so happy. But if you subscribe to the podcast, And if you leave the podcast a 5-star rating or a lovely review, it makes such a big difference for me. You have no idea what it means for my business and for the work that I do. So I would really appreciate you doing that if you have a little bit of time. And if you're serious about your career advancement and you want to take it a step further, make sure that you subscribe to my newsletter, because I will send it out to you weekly. It's packed with tips, it's packed with resources, and it's designed to support you as you navigate today's job market, corporate world. The link again is in the episode show notes. All right, let's begin. Let's have that conversation with the brilliant Michelle Redfern. Hi, I'm Renata Bernardi, and this is the Job Hunting Podcast, where I interview experts and professionals and discuss issues that are important for job hunters and those who are working to advance their careers. So make sure that you subscribe and follow, and let's dive right in.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Lead to Soar podcast. I am like a dog with 10 tails today because I've got one of my favourite people, friend of the pod, friend of Lead to Soar Network, and my friend Renata Bernardi here with me today. Hello, friend.
Hello, so exciting to be here. I love technology, linking us from two different parts of the world. I love it.
I know. Well, as we record, I'm here in Naarm, which is Melbourne, and it's going to be about 35 degrees Celsius today. And Renata's in London, where it's not 35 degrees, well, north of London, where it's not 35 degrees Celsius. She told me it just snowed. And here we are. It's like we're in the lounge room together having a chat. Wonderful.
Yes, perfect technology. I can hear you perfectly fine.
It's wonderful. So for listeners who haven't been introduced to Renata before, I'll give a little spiel, but then I'm going to ask you to sort of really give us your positional purpose. But to set this up, we're going to do a two-parter. We're recording a two-parter. So this one you're listening to right now is part one around job hunting, and part one is going to be for leaders. And when you think about your role as a hiring manager, does that thought of I've got to hire people fill you with joy or dread? So we're going to talk about that first. And then the other side, so next week you can tune into Renata and I talking again about being a job hunter, and particularly at this time of year. So as we're recording and as the episode will go live, it is December 2024, and it's a really nerve-wracking time for job seekers because the world goes into holiday season. So we've got two parts here, both sides of that equation, the hiring managers and the job seekers. But why am I talking to Renata about this? Because she is the job hunting expert. Renata has been hosting her own podcast and coaching and enablement practice for a number of years now. The podcast is called the Job Hunting Podcast. She sends out a very, very useful newsletter every week, which often stimulates me to go, oh, I got to talk to Renata, which is why we're here today. And she really helps close the gap for job seekers in what is becoming it's a highly technical, highly advanced and highly competitive market. And I have seen her create some wonderful outcomes for both individuals and organisations in terms of being able to navigate that complexity. So welcome, Renata. But, when people say to you, hey, lovely to meet you, Renata, what do you do? What do you explain? Or what do you say?
I love when young people ask me this, like really young, like, children, because it's so simple. I help people find jobs. That's what I love to do. If they have an idea of what job they want, yes, it's an easier job for me. If they have no idea, then there's a little bit of career counseling and support in order to get their career on track or their plans ready before they go to market. And many times, I would say 80% of the time, we need to go through that step first before we go to market. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I love it. And you and I have talked often, but we've talked about the fact that we're both living, we're following our bliss or living our ikigai, which is doing things that we love, that we're good at, that the world needs and we can get paid for. So
Mm.
it's that beautiful Venn diagram, and I certainly know, people, and particularly the women that we both know have had some terrific outcomes, because it is a process and there are technical skills and there are things to know about the process around hiring and
Mm.
being hired. So let's kick off with the first part of the equation, which is the hiring manager. So many of our listeners and the women in our Lead to Soar network are managers, and they
Mm.
have responsibility for talent management, which includes sourcing or identifying, sourcing, hiring the best and brightest talent. But
Yeah.
you recently wrote in your newsletter, and it did hit a little nerve with me, and it reminded me of when I was a hiring manager of the, oh my God, I got to
Mm.
do hiring. Now, I think hiring differs, the processes differ, depending what level you're hiring for in the organisation. But there's no doubt that there would be a number of leaders going, oh my God, hiring is a pain in the proverbial. And I don't love it. I just want the outcome.
Mm.
So you've written about why it feels like a burden, but importantly, what we can
Mm.
do about that burden and turn it into a joy. So the very first thing is, why does our heart sink when we think, oh my God, I've got to go to market for a job or a
Mm.
team or whatever it may be? Why does that happen?
I I think that what happens, and inside my coaching, when I'm working with job candidates, we go through that for an entire module of my program, because we need to stop navel gazing and think about the hiring manager, think about the HR department, and when they invite agents to be part of it, the recruiters as well. It is so bureaucratic, that process, for most organizations. And if you're working with a small organization when there is no bureaucracy, it's still such a risky process to go through for them. Such a big investment to create a new role, to replace somebody, with somebody new. The investment of time, commitment, onboarding, training and development, making sure that you hire the right person. And because of the performance aspect of the selection process, which we still haven't really figured out how to do it best, people put a facade up for sale
Mm,
that may not
mm.
necessarily be the real authentic self, right? We all do that because that's what's required of us. Um, and then, of course, it doesn't work because that facade then goes away after the honeymoon period, after the probation period, and then you're stuck with somebody that may not be the right fit for your organization, and vice versa. You could be the job seeker who steps into an organization thinking it's the Denise Bees, and it's not.
Mm, mm.
So it's such a difficult process to go through. It's a wicked task for everybody involved, not just the job seeker.
I I'm having a little itchy, scratchy moments here, remembering that, and thinking, oh God, I've got to raise a request to replace someone, and I do recall, even at very senior, at executive level, thinking, okay, so I've got to replace because someone's given me their resignation, whatever it may be, and knowing that when I go for that approval to hire, it'll be, well, this might be an opportunity to see if we can stretch that role into other people's, or let's not backfill it just now and see how we go. And you've got to, so there's for some organisations, and particularly at this moment in the worldwide economy where the
Mhm.
belt buckles are being tightened, there's that anxiety around, will they let me backfill this role? So
Yes.
I think that's number one. And number two, which I think is really, I don't know, a thing is, do we just blindly hurtle into getting us, basically a warm body
Mm.
into the role? We just need someone, irrespective of what our strategic goals are for the organisation. And
Mm.
I'm reminded of a conversation I had just recently with the CEO of one of my clients. client organisations, and we were having a listening session with one of the leaders in the organisation, because that's what he does with me regularly. Here's a hint, leaders, very good thing to do. And the leader, the CEO said, I'd like to get some feedback. And this person said, you got to help us slow down. And these are my words, not theirs, but you've got to help us slow down, because we have a vacant role and we just go to market and get the first available third person. And in the context of what we were talking about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we forget all that stuff and we just grab literally the first available person who looks and feels okay, because we're busy and we've got to get, blah, blah, blah. But you're suggesting that we should be stopping to say, how might we grow and innovate better through this process? But then you've got this competing priority of, but we're busy, Renata, and we need to have someone in that role. What's your suggestion for hiring managers to help have that conversation, and I guess senior leaders to help have that conversation, say we need to be much more thoughtful and intentional?
Well, Michelle, I think what has happened, I want to take a step back, which I find this all fascinating, right? The reason, the fact that you reached out to me because of a newsletter that I sent out, and that newsletter had subscribers only information about a conversation that I had with a very, very senior captain of industry in Australia. If you can think about the most conservative male, quite senior in the corporate Australia, that's the person that contacted me because of the previous newsletter that was also about hybrid work and the leadership that's necessary to lead in a hybrid world. And to see that both of you from completely different parts of the spectrum of Australians corporate world agree about the fact that there's something wrong with hiring says a lot about hiring, right? So I find that fascinating. So what I think was fascinating about he's an incredibly smart guy, and bless him, he was a great mentor to me for a long period of time, right? So really great mentor for me, really, really supportive of my career. And he said, I miss the fact, I miss the time when we would hire people when we needed them, when productivity was going well and the company was growing. And in order for the company to grow more, we had to hire more people to do the same task, or we needed to create a new department to deal with an innovation or a different creation. There was a straight correlation between need and supply and demand, right? Today, because of the way that we work with state departments, federal government, metrics that are needed for the end of year results for shareholders, etc. We sometimes hire and fire people at random. It makes no sense. And to take that away from human resources, from HR, that just disenfranchise everybody, right? So the leaders or the boards make those decisions, and then those decisions trickle down, and nothing makes sense anymore. And people lose the passion and the interest in the task at hand. And that's why you end up hiring people that don't fit the culture, when you don't pay attention to the biases that exist within the process, because you know that 2 years from now, those people that you're hiring, you will be firing, because they will be made redundant in some sort of restructure. That's the sort of ebbs and flows of corporate Australia and corporate everywhere, really. And there is a mid-tier, which is the mid-tier of clients that I have and you have in your community in Soar, that are at the most risk. They are not the workhorses at the bottom of the pyramid, and they are not the senior executives making decisions. They are the mid-tier senior managers, and they will be made redundant at some stage in their careers, maybe more than once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, right? So I think I spoke too much, but I think that is the real big issue now that we're facing. But what we've noticed in 2024, and when I say we, I'm talking about myself, anecdotally, and recruiters that I spoke to, that I speak to, that I've been to interviewed even this week, is that this seems to be bigger than just ebbs and flows. There seems to be a shift in how hiring is being made or not made in 2024 and beyond. So we need to make sure that we wait until 2025 to see what's happening. But companies are taking actually longer, Michelle, to make decisions, to go to market, to hire people. Sometimes they go to market and then they pull back and they decide not to hire anybody. So that has been happening a lot in the past 12 months.
And I've certainly seen, there's a number of different alleyways I want to go down here. And one of them is I've seen on TikTok and others, because I love TikTok, but anyway, but on various social media platforms, including LinkedIn, the concept of the ghost job. And I know you've written about it as well, which is arguably, it's been presented as a highly unethical way that businesses operate to build up their, why do that? So a ghost job, an organisation advertises a whole bunch of jobs or a job with no intention of actually filling it, and which is obviously heartbreaking for those who invest their time and emotions into applying for it. So those ghost jobs, that's been a thing that I have certainly paid attention to over the course of this year. Why does that occur, Renata, do you think? Because that's one of the things that I think is odd.
Yes, that occurs so that, well, there reasons that are not so unethical, and then there are reasons that are really unethical. If people want to look at the job hunting podcast, if they go back to Halloween time, I think there are 1 or 2 episodes where I talk about the 2 types of ghosting. The ghosting where you are ghosted by recruiters, and that's very common and very true. And then the ghosting and the job that don't exist, right? And quite a few articles have been written in 2024 about this, and articles that were written because there was research that came out that showed that was true. Because I hear this from job seekers time and time again, but I hadn't sort of seen research or any sort of analysis about it. But it is true. So if you've gone through this, you are not going crazy. Organizations that do this, they may just put out an ad to see the talent out there.
Yep.
To check and see what's, is there still talent to be harvested, to be acquired in this specific area? Let's put a call out and meet with a few people, or at least receive their CVs. To check if we can develop this department or this area of expertise in this country or this state or this city. So they're still in development stage, but they need to understand if the talent.
They're doing a talent scan, in other words. Yeah. I have a really, I think it's given that you and I work with people who are looking for jobs, and we know, and particularly those mid and senior women who are looking for jobs, who find it absolutely frustrating. So I think there's, coming back to what your client has told you around, we just need to reimagine this whole, the way we're doing things. I think if we're doing a talent scan because we're potentially going to build a department or whatever, I think there's a different way of doing it. But the other thread I want to pull on is, so here's a tip, leaders. If you're going to post, if you want to do a talent scan, do it properly through, I guess, a very ethical talent partner. Because they've got ways of tapping their networks by saying, let's see who's out there, rather than putting up a job ad that gives people hope that can't be fulfilled. But the other one is it's workforce planning. I come from a contact center background, so my workforce planning, I guess, skills and bias is very strong. organizational design is one of my core competencies, because I spend a lot of time, particularly in the business process outsourcing world, making sure that I had the right people in the right place at the right time in my contact centers for my clients, which meant you had to forecast demand, and be able to flex up and down as demand flexed. So that's, but we're talking about frontline here. For you and I, we're talking about the management. Organisations do have to restructure. There's no doubt about it. We have to restructure orgs to continue to go from good to great, to maintain our competitive edge, to flex with with innovation and things like that. So I think restructures and roles being made redundant are a part of business life. I'd like us to get better at them in organisations. But if that is true, then how does that help, hinder, bring joy or a burden to hiring managers, and what can we do about it?
Yes. I'm still thinking, I want to answer that, but I'm still thinking about the ghost jobs, because
Okay.
I want to go back to that before we move on, because there is a different type of ghost jobs that affects most of the people that we see, my clients in your community. And those are the unethical ones, where you invite people in and you ask them to present. And they do a presentation, something about the strategy or develop a new product or something, and they never hire anybody and they just steal your idea. And this is a big deal for me. I'm very angry about this for my clients, because my clients are senior people. They're busy. They have more stuff to do than to be preparing strategies for free. And we have, in fact, it was my that created this for the first time, and he was very young when he used it, but we have done NDAs to prevent people to use your ideas, right?
Good idea.
So yeah, because it's very common for job seekers to sign NDAs when they go into a very senior job search for an executive role. It's very common that they sign an NDA. I have never heard of job seekers asking the company to sign an NDA, preventing them to share or use the ideas or information that will be shared in the interviewing process. And I think it's time for us to take control of our careers. And now I can go straight into the question that you've asked me about restructures. From a job seeker's perspective, you just need to know that you will always be a highly regarded professional if you're in or if you're out of work. The fact that you have gone through a restructure and you don't have a job should not prevent you to believe or know in your heart that you are a great marketing manager, financial controller, whatever it is that you are. So that's the first.
And to interrupt there, what I often say to the women that I work with is, your role was made redundant. You weren't made redundant.
Exactly.
So, and it's a bit of a mindset thing as well.
Yes. You're absolutely right about workforce planning, though. And this, I think you're right about restructures, of course. And we will see a rapid update on workforce planning as AI takes over some of the manual tasks, and we as corporate professionals need to be ready for that. A lot of the things that we have hated doing, we can't complain too much, because the things that we didn't like doing will be replaced by AI, and we will just need to be better at and more sophisticated in our understanding of our strengths, right? So
Totally.
I think when we're thinking about the HR professionals, and going back to the newsletters that you've read, all of this started because I think it's really important for us to understand what leadership is about at this day and age of remote and hybrid work, and work that is ever changing in terms of structures and what's needed for the organization to move ahead in times that are, in complete volatility. But that will come also from everybody knowing what their strengths are, knowing what
Mhm.
they're good at, and having that empowerment. So the professional development of staff that is staying or staff that is leaving, in terms of doing some sort of strength training, understanding what's in their toolkit, their capabilities, their competencies, and for them not to be confused. This sounds so simple, doesn't it, Michelle?
It
But I
does.
cannot tell you how hard it is for people to know what their strengths are, to know
Oh,
what they're
Renata, you're singing my song here, and but I also want to say that that's an organisational thing as well. And I want to. There was a really so the CFO summit, the Australian Financial Review CFO summit, has been on this week in Australia,
Mhm.
and Nathan Goonan, who's actually a former colleague of mine from the NAB, who is now their CFO, was talking about AI and said, I am paraphrasing. We've got to get real here. We're all expecting this massive uptick in productivity, but we actually need to understand what our current productivity is and how it's going to uptick. And part of that for me, in exactly what you're saying, is what are people doing right now?
Mm.
What are they going to stop doing as a result of introducing artificial intelligence tools and techniques? And how much better are they going to get at other stuff? And of course, productivity is just not faster; it's actually developing, growing, innovating. All and it's to a large degree the knowledge work. So I think there's and part of that is saying what are the things that you are really good at, what are the things that can be automated or delegated, whether it's to another human or to a machine? And let's start doing more of that strengths based stuff. But you're
Mm.
right. What is it? And for organisational leaders listening, if we come back to hiring, are your managers joyful about hiring or not? And the data, anecdotal and otherwise, suggests not. Um, what what are we strong at and what are we weak at and what do we need to improve in this process so that we can help shift the mindset of our leaders around hiring and get much, much better outcomes? Because at the
Mm.
end of the day, this is about avoiding what you said at the start of our chat, hiring the wrong person, then having to move them on, whether it's through whatever mechanism in a couple of years or less, because they're actually not the right person for the job. So I
Yes.
think that strengths-based approach is super important for both individuals and organisations.
Yes. 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 Of course. And I think that organizations. We had this discussion a few months ago in Melbourne. It was a boardroom full of people from companies in Melbourne, HR professionals, and we were discussing the hybrid world. Right now, this is the thing. Everybody's complaining. I mean, from an employer's perspective, they are complaining that people don't want to come back to the office, right? And it's affecting their culture. I challenge that. I think their culture was already challenging to begin with, right? So when you then put that challenging culture, challenging environment under this new hybrid world or remote work, then things fall apart.
Well, it's a
So
simple stress test of anything, isn't it?
exactly. So it was quite hard for me to be diplomatic in that room because, it's not me saying that. It's not anecdotal. This is research based.
Yeah.
This is important work that people, in HR and leaders should be reading about. So I became quite nerdy in the boardroom, and I brought to them two management theories that I think are very applicable for this day and age, even though they are very old. And one is, the link between technology and human factors. And that social technological research is over 100 years old. Like it started when um, big mining equipment were brought to mines here in the UK, and
Yep.
all of a sudden productivity went down. Productivity went down. That was like in the 30s, I think. And people then started, researching this. And of course, it broke down the social interactions between the miners, the fact that they were digging the mine together and having those great interactions. It made a difficult job, a terrible job at times, enjoyable for them
Mm.
because of the friendships and the community that was developed. All of a sudden, you have noisy machines and you have to be alone inside a machine digging, and you lose that sense of community. All of a sudden, the productivity went down for years. It had to have interventions for it to go back up. Did we go back to using a shovel to mine? No, right? So I think this is what employers need to
That is
know.
so fascinating. That is, and do you know, I'm actually doing that. Big noisy machines in our homes, in our home office.
Yeah,
Not and that is just fascinating.
isn't it?
Um, what was the
I
reaction
actually
from the
was a,
people in the
I
room,
actually
though?
was a research officer for a research done in Melbourne. It was Melbourne University and one of the big health departments. There's Southern Health, Eastern Health,
Yep,
one of those.
yep.
I can't say which one because I think I'm not supposed to say. However, what was happening was nurses were given tablets and they were given all of these sort of technology to use. So nurses weren't supposed to go up to the fifth floor of the hospital to ask for medication anymore and take that break and that breather between
Mm.
hard work and go upstairs and ask that lovely person that took care of the meds how she was doing and how was her engagement going. No, they had to do it using this bloody tablet that they hated, right? So you see what I mean? Have we
Yeah,
gone back? No, we haven't
no,
gone back. So we need to adapt to things as they come, with the good and the bad. Right now, there's bad things
totally.
about working hybrid, but most job seekers want to work hybrid.
Yep.
And recruiters and HR professionals are the agents in between, trying to manage those expectations from employers that, like Amazon, announced late 2024, they wanted everybody to come back in.
Hmm.
It's going to be terrible for their culture if they start opening exceptions. If they start
Yeah.
opening exceptions for somebody with a disability, or for a very high performing individual, or for somebody who has moved interstate, they will be given maybe a year, and then everybody else will resent it, and then all hell will break loose. That's my
I,
foot.
I've I've spoken, written, advised my clients a lot in this, particularly this 12-month period, about the way we do work. Work is something we do, not a place we go to. And the thing that I say, and it is so aligned with what you've just said, Renata, is we need to teach leaders how to be leaders in the new world, which is the current world, not the world. I often say, I joke, when I started work 947 years ago, your supervisor made sure that you turned up, kind of did your widgets and went home safe. We, as leaders, we have so many more responsibilities now, but we have to enable leaders with the right tools, with the right technology, with the right training, but also the right expectations and mindsets about the way we do work. So bringing that back to helping leaders have more joy around hiring, because it is necessary. We
Mm,
cannot, and I would counsel very, very strongly against putting the complete hiring process into the hands of AI. We cannot not help our hiring managers do that. What's a couple of tips now for, I guess, if it's the HR directors, the talent and sourcing team, both internal and external, what can they do to help hiring managers feel better and be better in this process?
mm. I think we need to do maybe a sentiment survey of the candidates, the talent pool, to understand that if you want this type of talent coming into your organization, these are the sort of expectations that they have. Some of it will be around salary, but as we know, since the pandemic, salary is not as important as it used to be. It still is, but somebody will accept a lower salary to work from home.
Mm,
right? And those sort of flexibilities that before the pandemic were so rare, hardly ever given, now is really expected. You have to be mindful of that. Um, the other thing too is to understand that you are hiring for skills, right? So job ads that are ridiculously put together, and I'm not blaming recruiters or HR. I think it's a combination of both, but it's probably people that have no training that put together a job description or an ideal candidate representation that does not exist. I have a client that
Are
just
you
got.
talking about the super person or the unicorn? You know, the laundry list of everything I've ever wanted in a human being? Is that
Yes.
what you mean? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that's what I mean. And that is so bizarre. I have a client who got a job and her role had been advertised for months. I believe
Mhm.
it was over 8 months.
Wow.
And she got this role not because she was a superhuman and a unicorn, but because they gave up on looking for somebody, and she's doing just fine. They love her. She's highly regarded, extremely productive, efficient, etc., etc. She was just, they would never hire somebody that they were looking for. They did not have to settle for her. They just needed to be realistic, right?
Mm, mm,
So I think that understanding what's out there in the market and vice versa. Many times people book consultations with me and they say, oh, I want to do I don't know, business transformation. I'm just coming up with this word.
mm.
I say, well, have you seen any jobs with business transformation in the job title? Let's have a look on LinkedIn. And you look and there's nothing. So it goes both ways. The
Yeah,
job seeker is unaware of what the demands are, and the HR department and the hiring managers are unaware of what the job market pool is for them.
so to be really crystal clear, let's. I think there's a job here for both on all sides of the hiring manager paradigm. So whether it's the HR business partner, the talent and sourcing team, but also the hiring manager to say, what do we really need here? And I would suggest that if as a leader you haven't got a skills matrix for your team, you should have one. We have them for boards, and they are highly effective. And you Google skills matrix, and you'll find them everywhere. And you really document what are the skills and attributes required to deliver the outcomes that my team has to deliver for the organisation? And then you do a bit of a map, because there's going to be no one person that does everything, right? And then you go, okay, so we've got a gap in this and that. And this is the person we need now. We need
Mm.
a person who's got strong interpersonal skills, relationship management skills, and is an engineer, for example, whatever it may be. And you go and hire for that. And I think if I put my gender equity lens on, or hat on, I should say, um, what that also does is say, hey, we're not looking for the unicorn, super person, ninja, whatever, superlative you'd like to use. Women, please
Mm.
apply, because this is within your purview. This is within your skill set. So it's going to attract more applications, I would have thought, Renata, if we get much sharper around these job ads and job descriptions.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. And also the other thing that I think is important, in addition to understanding the pool of talent and how hiring needs to happen and how the onboarding and training and development needs to happen for them to join your organization, it's also to make the whole process more human.
Yeah, oh
And you
God, yes.
can do that with an ATS system, an applicant tracking system. I'm not saying you don't need the software. What I'm saying is that it's not really about artificial intelligence or machine learning or softwares, and that's not what I mean. By more human, I mean understand the vulnerability of the people involved, right? So be less demanding of them showcasing some sort of executive presence or professional presence that you think the ideal candidate for that position needs to have. Many times, Michelle, I have found that the interview process that we have established as the benchmark for recruitment is not ideal to hire certain types of individuals or certain types of roles. Right? So there are roles in the organization that can be very well filled by people that are shy and introverted and neurodiverse, and they will be just fine doing that job. They can be leaders, they can be colleagues, they can be part of a team without putting on a show
Yep.
at the job interview.
I
Right?
love
So
that. I love that.
that is another thing that I used to do when I was in the corporate world that I think HR leaders can do with the hiring managers is to prepare them, right? Prepare the panel, the selection panel, to be more accepting of people that come from different backgrounds, to don't expect everybody to look like them, to hire people that are different, because that will be so beneficial for the organization. And I don't think that the interview process is an ideal process for some individuals to go through, right?
I agree.
Yeah. So I think
Well,
that
well,
that might
well,
be a good way.
certainly, I think, that for those long-time listeners, you will have heard us interview Erica Jefferson earlier this year and talk, and one of her lines, which I keep repeating, is going for a job shouldn't be like an episode of the Hunger Games. But on, so for hiring managers or for organisational leaders now, what I can summarise here is let's plan much more effectively, so that we're not having those knee-jerk reactions. And I'll add another one in there. I think there's a lot of internal talent sourcing teams who have got time to fill targets, which are the antithesis of what we're trying to do here. So greater planning. I think let's help leaders be great by training them on the new ways of work, whether it's looking at, as we talked about, hybrid work, remote work, but also the interview process. How are we going to be high EQ leaders and really help people bring their best self to the hiring process? We want to get the best out of this person opposite us, whether it's on a screen, in a room, or whatever it may be. And then I think the other thing that you've said, Renata, also is, let's look at just the whole, all of the job ads and stop trying to hire the unicorn, the super person, the ninja, whatever it may be. So they're three really great, categories of to-dos for organisational leaders to help all your hiring managers think of hiring as, well, maybe they won't think of it as a joy, but let's help them not have a sinking heart every time they go, oh no, I have to go to market for a job, because that's important. We want people to be in great places with great bosses, and this is a really big part of it. Renata Bernardi, thank you for your wisdom. And listeners, tune in next week, because we're going to have a talk about the flip side. What happens if you're a job seeker at this time of year? So tune in. But Renata, thank you for your wisdom as always.
My pleasure, Michelle.